Hi guys, it's Katya here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today we're gonna be talking about how to care for the plants that you have imported. So if you're not familiar, I have imported quite a few plants back in November with 3 of my friends. I'm still babysitting one part of them, so not all the plants that you see here are mine. We have imported from Indonesia, and I will be making another video where I'll be talking about the importing process and all of that, but for now we're gonna focus on how to successfully rehab plants after the import. So we received this on 11th of November and it's about a month later and they're doing surprisingly good. I'm getting new leaves on them, there's fresh roots. It's just such a good import. I've had worse experiences and they've rehabbed super well, so I'll take you through how I did it. So first, when you receive the plants, be sure that you are opening it in a separate area where you don't usually keep majority of your house plants, because you never know what's hiding in there. So the plants might come with some sort of pests, bacterial problems and fungal problems, so it's better to open them up in some sort of neutral environment. First, what you have to do is unpackage them. Indonesians tend to stack them up, so they will be very flattened, so be sure to carefully remove the packages. Usually they will wrap them in some sort of paper and the roots will be wrapped in sphagnum moss, which will be wrapped with plastic. So first you want to remove the paper just so you can check out on the leaves. If you see any that have bacterial problems, don't hesitate, cut them right away. I will show you some of the examples of how bacterial problems look like. It's just not worth dealing with them, and especially if they're mushy, the leaf will die anyways. And here it's really not the best practice to keep them on the plant for as long as possible. So once you've cut the leaves, it's time to check out on the roots. Usually they tend to pack them very tight. Some of the roots might break during that process. Also, what I forgot to mention is all the plants that you are importing have undergone some sort of chemical treatment that is required whenever plants from third countries are entering your country, and this is just so they prevent spread of pests, viruses, and just to protect the ecosystem that exists here. So what this means is they will be exposed to harsh chemicals which can to some degree damage their leaves, they can damage their roots, and they will be susceptible to any sort of further damage. This is also why you will see a lot of fungal and bacterial problems on the leaves as well. So when you open the roots, it's best to cut away any of the rotting ones or the ones that have broken away, because the root will just not continue growing from there. It will just continue to rot, so it's better to remove it at first. Be sure to always sterilize your equipment, and once you've done that, you've cleared all of the litter that might be on the plants. What I like to do is I like to soak them up in a bathtub or any of the containers that you have. So these plants have traveled great distances, and as I mentioned, they have undergone extensive circumstances, so they are pretty much stressed and they have lost quite some water on their way here, even though if it was just a few days. So I found that it's the best to leave them soaking, like fully submerge them in water and leave them soaking for 30 minutes to an hour. It really does wonders. During this time, not only the roots can rehydrate, but also the leaves, which I don't see many people doing, and I think it's a really important part. And I forgot to mention that I only soak them in lukewarm water. I don't add anything to the water. I don't feel like it's necessary. So once they finish the soaking, your next step is to evaluate in what condition is the plant and what kind of treatment will it need. If you have a plant that has a good root system, you will see those fresh white roots that are still growing. You can easily pot that plant in a light airy mix and it will do just fine. However, sometimes you will get very rotten roots and you have to cut out majority of them, and in these cases what I like to do is I like to use sphagnum moss, and whenever I'm doubting if the plant is ready for soil or not, I just tend to go for sphagnum moss. This is my personal preference. I know some people just straight up pot them up. With sphagnum moss you can monitor how the roots are growing, especially if you're using a see-through containers. These are very good, especially with imports, because in the first few days you'll be needing to check on them a bit more often just so you see if they're doing well or if they're declining. I did forgot to mention, before you pot them up, you can leave them soaking overnight in a glass of water just so the roots can further rehydrate. This step is optional. I tend to do it because it gives me good results, and I don't use just plain water. I also add some super thrive to it and it does wonders. What I did is I potted them up actually 2 days after, because I received them just before my exams and I was hella busy at that time. and they did fine. I put them in an enclosed container box which kept the humidity at all times high. As I mentioned, the leaves are super fragile and they're susceptible to water loss, and if you do not keep a high enough relative humidity, the water will be transpiring from the leaves and the air can just suck out the water from the leaves and they just curl. And it's not pretty. It can happen within a few hours, so be sure to put them in high humidity as soon as possible, because this way you ensure that the leaves will be staying on the plant as possible. As I mentioned, it's good to keep them separate for another reason, and that is pests. During that time I was checking if I saw any pests before I introduced them to my greenhouse, just because you don't want any of the outbreaks. Common pests that tend to travel from imports are scales and mealybugs. This is what I heard from other people. I was lucky and didn't have such experience. So then I just put them in my grow tent, and you want to have them sitting in some sort of shaded spot, and that's because they have been in a box for 5 days. Good case scenario. And if you expose them to high levels of light, it can shock them and they will drop their leaves. So it's better to keep them in darker areas. In the first few days, the plants looked like shit. Some were so sad, especially this Pests here. It was so droopy, it just couldn't hold its leaf. The leaves just weren't keeping their shape, and some of the plants were rotting. She was rotting as well. And if you see any rot, be sure to cut it first. If you have any plant that's really dehydrated, I do recommend keeping it in water, just because I feel like this helps to rehydrate the plant better rather than keeping it in soil or sphagnum moss. So in the first days they look shit, don't worry, usually they'll bounce right back. Especially the bigger plants tend to travel worse than smaller ones, and that's because they are more established and used to the environment that they have grown in. And this guy here, this is a big Josebuona, hope I'm pronouncing this right. So this guy didn't have much roots. It had like 3 stingy roots and they weren't healthy looking, and I was really worrying for this plant because it is a big boy. Let me show you how big it is. Okay. So, hopefully it's focused. So this is the big boy, this is not mine, sadly. So this is the biggest plant that we've ordered, and it has rehabbed very well. As you can see, it's already pushing out a new leaf. This leaf was just unfurling when we have received it. As you can see, it is a beautiful half moon. Part of it here is kinda dying away, and this is because this part of the leaf came damaged. And it's normal with variegated parts, they tend to be a bit more sensitive to the damages. But so far it has rehabbed super well. It is growing. Can I show you? Will you see? Okay. Hopefully you can see there is some roots growing here, and the leaves are staying nice and firm, and they have started reaching towards the light, so it has definitely responded well to the grow tent environment. So smaller plants tend to travel better for some reason, but if something is rotting, the whole plant can easily rot. I have one Anthurium magnificum that I had to cut up all the leaves because they were just mush, and it has been a stump basically, and it is pushing out a new growth. However, the growth from the apical meristem is kinda now turning yellow, so it seems like it's supporting the top growth, but instead it is activating the side nodes of the stem. So it's really interesting what plants do when they think something is best for them. So as I mentioned, during this time I had exams and I really didn't have the time to check on them every day for a lot of time, so I've kind of just let them be, and they were okay. And after a week or so I started seeing some of the new roots growing, especially in the plants that I have kept in my propagation box, which sits on a heating mat, and above it is a grow light. But yeah, let me just show you some of the aerial roots that they have grown. This is Anthurium crystallinum. You can see it has grown crazy aerial roots. It's actually a very beautiful plant, very sparkly though. Again, not mine, babysitting it. And here's another general tip. Philodendrons have more thin roots and they will rot easier, whereas Anthuriums have more chunkier roots and they tend to ship better. Especially Gloriosums, they didn't have the best roots, and I've kind of had to reroot them almost. They're doing super well. They have dropped some of the bottom leaves, but look, it is pushing out a new leaf. This is a fresh leaf. It is, oh, let me, it's a cutie pie, and can I, okay, we want to see some root porn. I got you, fam. Can I, like, I am so proud. This has all grown in 1 month's time. So yeah, whenever you're rehabbing, be sure that you have warm conditions. I feel like the warmth really plays a big part here, and the high humidity. Light doesn't, they still need to have sufficient light, but I feel like the warmth and humidity really do the biggest trick. Kitty roots, they smell. And I want to show you the Pests. So as you can see, she's a big girl. So the story with this girl is she had rot on the bottom of the stem, and I had to cut that off, and she had two stringy roots that weren't looking the best. You know, the type of roots where you don't know if it's healthy or if it's just rotten. Here is, randomly, Philodendron adipopoense cutting. This was also an import, and the top part has grown so much. Can you see the aerial roots? And I've cut it, and it will be going to my friend. Okay, the Pests, as I mentioned, she was rotting and she had pretty much zero roots. And look at those fuzzy roots. She is so happy. She is currently pushing out a new leaf as well, and I thought these leaves were going to drop because they are still a bit yellow, as you can see, but they have kinda stayed on the plant. So moral of the story, sometimes plants really thrive on neglect. You just gotta let them be, do their own thing. We've imported 22 plants and we haven't lost any of them in terms that they have died and there is no way to actually, you know, propagate them or save any bits. As I mentioned, the worst case that I have right now is anterior magnificum stump, but it is pushing out growth and there is root growth, so I'm not worried about that. Here's my experience with importing. Again, this is my process, how I do things. I know everyone has their own methods, but this really worked well for me and I thought I'd share. So yeah, if you have any questions about importing, any specific questions about plant care after you receive them, be sure to let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. And yeah, I think that's it for this video. Hope you guys are doing well, and I'll see you next time. Bye!